All right, welcome back to the Cricket Unfiltered podcast. It's our
Do you think
Ashes
anyone
preview.
watching live walks away during that?
No,
and then they hear us
There's
talking
like 8
again?
people watching
And
live,
they're-
Jelisa. and they're used to it by now. And I do it really quickly. Aren't I a pro at that? Like, if you're watching on YouTube, it's like it never happened. Like, anyway.
Okay.
Hey, before we get to it, I'll give you my spreadsheet quickly.
Sorry, yeah.
Do you want the individual ones or just go straight to the total?
I walked past it on purpose, but whatever. Hello, Raj, if you're listening.
I'll go straight to the total, or you want the individuals?
You got to give us the individuals. You go.
What's the spreadsheet on what?
Paul rates every player and then a couple of other things, and we get a total mark.
Very Fox Sports News.
So out of 10 for the batters, Warner 6, Kawaja 6, Labuschagne 9.5, Smith 10, Head 8.5, Green 6.5, Carey 7.5, Stark 4, and then a combined Cummins, Lyon, and Boland of 1.5. That gives us a total of 59.5 for England. Duckett 8, Crawley 4.5, Pope 8.5, Root 9.5, Brook 8, Stokes 7, Bairstow 9, Ali 6.5, Broad, Robinson, Anderson, a combined total of 2. That gives them 63, a slight edge. And bowling out of 20, Cummins. What are you laughing at?
Slight edge with the batting for England. Go on.
Mate, the figures are what the figures are.
You rate them, though. They're subjective ratings.
No, I'm not saying, I'm not saying this is any more than just a bit of a fun exercise. So bowling out of 20.
That's fun
Cummins,
for me.
Cummins 17.5, Boland 18.5, Stark 15, Lyon 15. The final bowler gets a rating out of 10. That's Green with 8. So 74 for the Aussies. And for England, Anderson 18, Broad 17.5, Robinson 19, Ali 13.5, Stokes plus Root 7 out of 10. Total 75. They beat us by 1 in the bowling. Fielding, I give the Aussies 9.5. I give England 8. 1%ers, I've listened to you, Menners. I've dropped the Australians to 6. And I give the English 10. So overall, out of 200, Australia gets 149, England 156. So it's almost a dead heat. I would say that if they were correct and you did 1,000 simulations, England would win, 510 and Australia would win 490. But obviously it comes down to who performs on the day and who gets the better of the conditions. Thank you.
The worst marks I've ever heard.
Thank
all
you.
right, let's get
Thank
into
you
the
for
list
listening
of
to
questions.
Paul's TED Talk.
Let's get into the list of questions. All right, first one from Kevin. Well, hi, Menners. I'd love to know your predictions for the Ashes, but we're going to go through everyone. I'll start. Top run scorer for either side, Steve Smith. I mean, that's just a gimme because he's just so good in English conditions. I sort of think someone like a Cameron Green at 6 might be a smoky.
Can I put a smoky in there?
Yeah, top run
Travis
scorer.
Head.
Well, it's not a smoky. I mean, it's like
No,
scored
but
160.
but everyone would say Steve Smith. Or,
okay. What about you, Paul? Who's the leading run scorer for both teams?
Like, what do you mean a smoky? Well, I'm not going to go Cummins, am I? Like,
no, that's true.
For me, for both teams,
Green. That's not really a smoky. Go on.
Jesus, I don't know. I'm going to go Ollie Pope.
Yeah, I like it. I knew you'd go something outrageous. All right, top wicket taker for either side.
Hi.
England Robinson.
England Robinson, like it. Jelisa.
This one you won't agree with. I'm gonna go Stark. I reckon he's gonna have a blinder.
I love it because I love it. The conditions will suit him. It could happen.
I think it could go either way. It could be disastrous, but I want him so badly to do so well.
Yeah. The sensible thing for me is Pat Cummins because he'll likely play 4 or 5 of the tests. So then he'll probably take most of the wickets. But I actually think someone like Cameron Green, I said him with the bat, but also with the ball, unless he gets injured, he will play all 5 tests. And he might be the only fast bowler for Australia that does that. He might take 20 wickets and be the leading wicket taker for Australia. Might not to get the series, though.
Big call. I mean, I don't disagree. I think it's going to be hard for him to get the number of overs to be best bowler of the series. But if he starts to dominate, they'll give him the ball more and more. I'll take Scott Boland as mine.
Love it.
I love that.
Right now, the series result. Jelisa, what is yours?
3-2.
Who?
Oz.
Like it. Paul?
3-2 England.
All right. Nightmare time. I think it'll be 4 or 5-0 Australia. So I'll go 5-0 because I don't think Bazball plays for draws. No. This is not some McGrath.
You're not listening to me. I get scared when you make predictions like that because you're always wrong.
I've got a bone to pick with you. Okay, well, okay, listeners. So we had to do a promo for this new network, and Jelisa records this bit. Oh, and come and listen to Mena's insane attention-seeking cricket opinions, which I edited out swiftly.
That was the best part of the promo.
Which of your co-hosts says Tim David should open the batting? Glenn Maxwell should open the batting. Wicket keeping doesn't matter. Batting orders doesn't matter. Captaincy doesn't matter. Which of your co-hosts does that?
Whoever he is, he's smart. That guy.
Yeah.
That's some good points, Menas.
Which of my co-hosts is just, you know why you don't say any of those things? Because you're too busy like slamming Pat Cummins.
It's ridiculous.
And that's all you are.
I'm going to find all the articles of people talking about Pat Cummins' captaincy in India and just send them to you after this. All I'm saying is maybe both your hosts, maybe he says insane cricket opinions too. Like, can you next time at least say both my co-hosts are insane?
You took that bit out. That was the best bit.
Okay, Jelisa, you're in Channel 10. If I give you a brief for 25 seconds and it's 45 seconds, something has to go. So, of course.
Yeah, well, the end bit.
What you should have done, Menas, is kept that bit in and just duplicated it 8 times and just had that as the entire preview.
I'm sure they would love that.
Exactly.
I didn't kind of realize that it might have hurt you, that statement, but I as soon as I heard Jalisa's preview, I just replied saying, that's fantastic. We shouldn't bother recording our own because we can't do as good. And then it's like after she's bagged the living hell out of Menas.
I don't mind that. All I'm saying is I'm not the one saying Tim David should open the batting in Test cricket.
The fact that I called you an insane attention seeker, that would have just played right in for you. You would have loved that. I bet you've played that promo over and over.
I just keep thinking about little Paul Dennett over here, just scooting by with his insane cricket opinions flying under the radar, and I get labelled with the shit.
All I'll say is that my comments around Tim David, I can imagine if we had done a podcast in 2009, would have had exactly the same debate about David Warner, and you would have said there's no way he can ever play Test cricket.
I would not have.
You would have.
I would not have. Absolutely not. All right, now, okay, I'll just finish on that 5-0. Look, not hyperbolic or sort of a Glenn McGrath. Whenever I look at the questions that Australia have to face, I think they've got an answer. And obviously, cricket is not played on paper, so a lot of the players could have stinkers and therefore we lose. But just everything that I think is England's going to throw at Australia, I think we're going to be able to cope with. I love where the team is at in terms of, like, they're very calm, they're very measured, and I think that's going to play really well against Bazball, because one thing that McDonald and Cummins have brought to them is not a very reactive team. They're just going to soak it up and play their game, and I think we're going to smash them, and I think England are due for a shellacking. All right, next question. Jack Clifton. Go on.
Sorry, go on. Do I have to have a break? Or...
No, we've done our breaks. In regards to the 4 quick bowling options, will it come down to a case of what bowlers best suit the conditions, or do some quicks have more value regardless of playing conditions?
I think this comes down to a little bit of what we were saying before. I think it should just come down to the conditions, but I think the value of incumbents, the value of Cummins being captain, which I don't also think should play into it. I think all of that gets taken into account, and I don't agree that it should.
I also think it comes down to the length of the test matches. Like, if these test matches go into the 5th day, then they will have to rotate the bowlers.
Oh, they'll have to. Yeah, there's no doubt.
Next question, Martin Lawrence. I know England is struggling to find a spinner without Leach. Could we see an all-pace lineup? Paul, what do you think? Do you think they'll pick Ali or?
I think if they'd prepared a pitch that was similar to what English pitches had been in the past, then an all-pace lineup would have made sense. Like Chris Wokes instead of Ali, I think would match up very well. However, if this first pitch, and who knows, when you're talking about a pitch a couple of days out, it can change a character. But it's hard to say getting much greener between now and then, I would have thought. So if that's the sort of pitch that they're going to produce, then I'd be in favour of a spinner. And I think that Ali, although his recent 4-day cricket or red ball cricket has been very, very hardly any, I still think he's a very good player. And I think that he's done enough with bat and ball in white ball cricket to say that he could still do a job. I mean, Leach has a test record of an average of 34 with the ball, 28 in first-class cricket. It's not bad, but I don't think Leach's injury is anywhere near the blow that England are talking about.
Well, Leach has played a holding role for the team, much like Lyon does. I guess Moeen Ali does match up pretty well against Travis Head. He has had a weakness sometimes against good off spin, so that could be an area, just a one-on-one matchup. I think, though, if you've got 3 quicks and Ali, and that's where I was saying before, then you need Stokes. So I know you think the part-timers might be able to bowl, but yeah, I could see them actually dropping Ali and picking 4 quicks.
I think that would be a huge mistake.
Mitchell Hall, if England lose the first test, do they have any surprise packets waiting in the wings?
Paul is probably best, or yourself probably best place for this. I definitely haven't watched enough of their lower grade.
Well, they've got some decent bowlers in the wings. Matthew Potts is the sort of bowler that could do well against Australia. He's a very English style of bowler. I think that he could be handy. We mentioned Chris Woke, so he's always someone that Australia in England has found particularly difficult. We touched on Mark Wood. I think that he might play a part at some point, although I don't think he's quite as effective against Australia as maybe he is against other sides in English conditions. And there's Tongue, Josh Tongue, who did well against Ireland. His record's reasonably okay. It's not amazing, but he obviously can bowl as well. So I think there's a few possibilities. There's a few possibilities there. As for the batting, I don't know.
I don't think they've
Dan
got many
Lawrence.
people.
There's Dan
Yeah,
Lawrence,
Dan
who I
Lawrence
don't. Yeah,
He's in the squad, but I think that's where you can see they're struggling in the top order, because they did talk about Stokes opening the batting to bring Bairstow up. So I think that's something you might see.
What about his name's gone out of my head. Was playing for the Thunder, Alex.
Alex Hales,
Yeah.
he plays baseball, but I don't know if he's in their test calculations.
Well, is it only because he's had a bit of a checkered past that he's never really been in the test?
I don't think he's been part of the red ball squad for a while, but
No, he hasn't. But is it? But I mean, it was because of that, right? So why
I
would
think that's
Harder.
why he wasn't in the white ball squad. I think he was a little bit further away from their red ball squad, regardless
Right.
of the. He's not the worst. There's also Liam Livingston. There's Josh Butler.
yeah.
There's a couple of guys there that could be okay, but and they're the sort of players that you would think that they really like. But I think that they're going to go with I think their lineup's fairly settled in terms of their top 7
Agree.
anyway.
All right, Aiden, is there pressure on Marnus to score a century this season? He's only scored 1 century outside of Australia in international cricket. Aiden, no, he averages 60 almost at test level. There's no pressure on him to score a century. I think Australia needs him to perform well, but performing well in England can be batting through a couple of tough sessions while the ball's moving around. So I don't think there's pressure to score a century, no.
No, I think there's no pressure on anyone if we're winning.
That's it, especially not when you're scoring that many. I think a century for David Warner would be good. And Aiden has asked, how many runs will Warner need to make in Edgbaston to retain his spot in the team? What do you think, Jelisa?
I think that comes down to the overall result. If we win, I don't think it's really taken into account much at all. A loss, well, I guess it depends on how everyone else performed.
No, you're right.
You can't.
You're right. If we lose, then
You can't really put a number on it.
no. What do you think, Paul? What does he need to do?
Yeah, I agree with Jelisa that the results come into it as well. Like, if he has a similar game to this first one where he gets a few runs without dominating, but Australia win, then I think that'll be fine. If Australia get absolutely rolled and he fails, then I think that's when it starts to crystallize. But I've said it before, I'm not convinced that the alternatives are going to do necessarily any better. Just back on that on Labuschagne, I agree there's no necessarily great pressure for him to score 100, but if he's going to be talked about as one of the, borderline all-time great in the years to come, or actually fully fledged all-time great, his home record at the moment averaging 70.5, which is just incredible, and his away record averaging 39.4. So there's not pressure in the sense that if he doesn't score hundreds, he's going to get dropped. But for him to really move into that that pantheon of the superstars, a decent Ashes series can't do him any harm.
By the way, I'm backing Warner to have a big series. I think he's got one left in him. I'm going to put him in for, say, at least 350 runs in the series. Flat pitches, he's going to come out and swing the bat. I think he's going to be decisive. I think he's going to have a much better series than Khawaja. And I think Warner will all be there at the SCG, clapping him off.
I think that is a very interesting element to it. The fact that he said that. I liked that he put a timeline on his retirement, but it felt almost like pressure on the selectors to keep it going until then. So I don't think that they should be pressured by that.
I think the selectors, that if he makes it all the way to the test before Sydney and on balance 51-49, they think he's not the right player to be picked in Sydney, drop him. It's not a kindergarten. It's a professional sport. There's not, don't give him a fair. I like him. I'd pick him. But if they make the honest judgment,
the NRL. Have you followed the Canberra Raiders, Jared Croker?
Happy
I'm too scared to answer that because Metas might play the sound that he's got. That if I speak,
can't
too much,
reach it.
but
Don't worry.
No, but I just don't see why would you not pick your best side? And
I feel
there should
ya.
be no concept of a farewell test.
Okay, but what if? Okay, well, I'm backing Warner to come good, and then it won't.
So
be
am I. I think he might, and I
hope he does.
I think it is a bit bizarre if they do dish up a number of very flat pitches. I think that he's really becomes dangerous then.
Yep, 5-0's coming. A couple more questions, then we'll wrap this up. Chin Music, are you concerned by the length of the tail if Stark or Nisa don't play? Then you would have Carey, Cummins, Boland, Lyon, Hazelwood, or Nisa.
No, he said if Nisa doesn't play, that would be the tail, and that's a long tail. I am a bit concerned about that.
Okay,
I
question.
am too.
Great question. Two Slips in a Gully podcast. There you go. You got your plug. Concerns over Stark's form. Do we play Boland and Hoff? We went through that one. Concerns over our ability to peg the runs back. India scored pretty freely at times. You two have any concerns about that?
My only concern, without trying to hammer him, is Stark. I think that the others will only go the journey if it's a real flat pitch. But in Stark's defence, pick him for his batting at the moment. I heard the stat that in England in Test matches, Stark averages more than Khawaja and Warner with the bat.
Well,
is that true?
There's a question here. Uzi looked extremely tentative at times, which is what led him to getting in trouble in 2019.
Sorry, I'm just reeling
Yes,
from
so
that.
Stark, Khawaja only averages 18 in England in Test cricket. So I'm actually concerned
20,
about
and
him.
Stark's, I think, low 20s.
Sorry, so he averages more than who's?
Stark more than Warner and Khawaja.
More than Warner?
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, scoring 90 runs.
Tim David might as well, if he was over there.
Here we go.
That's revolutionary.
So I think Warner will have a much better series
alone.
Khawaja. Open the batting with Stark.
Yeah. Open the batting.
And wicketkeeper. His reach is fantastic as a keeper.
I'm so great.
What have you done?
It's still useless at DRS. That's not a question. That's just a statement from Two Slips in the Gully. I guess the one thing that has changed since, say, the last Ashes, there's an extra review now. So you have to be really bad at DRS to stuff it up now. And look, every chance Cummins stuffs up a couple. He's been bowling a lot. He's tired, but hopefully Smith talks some sense into him. But I'm not as worried.
Whoever tells him to review it is, there's a whole team out there, man.
Exactly.
I was impressed with Rohit Sharma in that regard. I think the Australians are too nervous about not taking a review and then finding out that it was out. Of course, that's a disaster. But I think they should say, if we go through the entire series and we do have one or two that end up being like that, maybe that's where we need to be aiming for, because all the frivolous ones that we're currently doing are not helping us.
All right. Well, that is all for the listener questions. We're going to finish this with Can't Let It Go, which is that little bit of cricket news you just can't let go through to the keeper. I've been holding on to this one for a week. And
you were right straight on the text about, we don't know what it is, but you were saying you can't wait for Can't Let It Go.
This backs up Paul's theory about cricketers hating cricket. So Adam Zampa was interviewed the day before the World Test Championship final and was asked about it, and he didn't know who was playing.
No, that's not true.
That's true. He said, and then he said, "Oh, I'm excited for the Ashes," which every Aussie says. You don't even like cricket, and you say that. And I'm thinking, God, if I'm an Aussie teammate, go back and find it. It's on SEN somewhere.
No, I don't like that.
And then Josh Hazelwood today was asked about Bazball. You would have heard this. He said, "I don't watch much Test cricket."
Yeah.
Like basically, I haven't really seen England play.
Yeah.
Paul, any thoughts about that? I like the honesty, but that's mad.
It is not yet a crime to not like cricket. I have to state that to begin with. It is not yet. So I appreciate the honesty of them. But the only thing I'll say is, don't say that and then rock up in the commentary box in years to come.
That's
Then
exactly what I was
that's
going to say.
an insult. Glenn McGrath was interviewed recently for the BBC podcast, and they were talking about the 2005 series, and he was making the point that he doesn't watch a lot of cricket, and that's absolutely fine. How dare you go into the commentary box then? Get out of there. They look down upon those who watch cricket, and that's fine, but don't try and earn a living out of it. Jeff Thompson was the same. Wonderful bowler. I'd love to have a beer with him, but one of the worst commentators of all time. And he admitted he didn't watch any cricket except when he was commentating, and it bloody well showed.
Yeah, it frustrates me as well. I just find it, I don't like whenever anyone sounds like you're making the viewers of your sport sounds like, oh, I haven't got time for that. Like they've got time for watching me, but I don't know.
We would have liked David Warner joked about maybe playing a Sheffield Shield match on a press conference recently, and I was going to send it to you because it was like, well, it's like settle down. It's still playing first class cricket. It's not.
Yeah, I mean, but they can enjoy it. They can not watch what they're just say. Look, I don't watch it because.
But don't you think it's weird for a Test cricketer like Hazelwood, who's going to be like, if you're playing England in the Ashes, wouldn't you want to watch it? Enough of them to know what they're about.
Yeah, I find it a bit bizarre. I mean, but it's not uncommon for other sports that they don't watch each other and they don't know what each other's doing. I find it always very bizarre in sport because to me, I want to know every bit of the opposition. So I
understand it in the sense of, if I look after my own game, that's all that matters. And if I get too concerned with what the opposition does, then I might start to second guess myself. I get that. And I get that he just doesn't like watching it. As I said, it's not yet a crime, but just don't rock up in 5 years' time and, get on the Channel 7 coverage. Oh, I'm so excited about this.
Yeah. Oh, isn't this the best day in cricket? The BBL final. Don't we just look forward to it? Do ya?
Jelisa, do you have a can't let it go?
No, I was just going to say how much I love Bluey, but we already did that.
Jokes aside, that Bluey episode, it's not some masterpiece. It's a nice cartoon, and I like the fact that there's a lot of Americans who will know a bit more about cricket.
I haven't seen that episode yet. I've seen a lot of episodes of Bluey. I think it's a fabulous show, and it was interesting that on the night
you missed on Twitter though, Bluey on the cricket Twitters the last 2 days. I don't know how you've missed it.
I haven't been on Twitter I've lost a lot of interest in Twitter.
Okay, well.
Oh, is your
every cricket journo has been tweeting about Bluey in the last 2 days.
Is your timeline filled with people you don't follow? Because that's why I've lost cricket. I mean, that's why I lost Twitter.
You've got to switch views. You switch from there's two. The default is whatever they serve you up. Switch to the other column, and you'll get back to what you used to get the chronological order, and then you'll be fine. Have a look at it, and you'll see that, and you won't get all the nonsense.
I'll tell you after.
Okay.
But I was going to say, it was interesting on that final night that the Channel 7 and Channel 9 News were the top 2 rating shows in Australia. The third top rating show was Bluey, and just being beaten by Bluey was the first session of the final day's play. So the cricket came forth, beating 60 Minutes, beating the AFL, beating MasterChef, beating the ABC News. It rated really, really well.
Anyway, Bluey's going off. R.I.P. Bluey and Rusty. Paul, do you ever can't let it go?
I do. Just quickly, just a couple of comments on the live. Martin Lawrence said, Paul is doing his own Roy Simmons calculation. Roy Simon's calculation. I'm tired. I did it before him when he started doing it. I was like, I've done this. Anyway, thanks to all the other comments.
I think Simon's put a lot more thought into his.
Oh, mate.
Oh, what'd you do? Don't hurt him like that.
All right, what you can't let it go, Paul. We've got to wrap this up.
My can't let it go is that a few weeks ago, Brian Booth died, and he was 89 and had a fine Test career, played 29 Tests, averaged in the sort of low to mid 40s, captained Australia twice. And predictably, there were lots of really nice obituaries and comments about him, and they were all well deserved. I was disappointed that the Sydney Morning Herald almost said nothing about him. The main sort of paper, the main kind of, no, it's no longer a broadsheet, but the main broadsheet paper in his hometown, or the town that he played for, had a 150-word obituary very, very briefly, and a couple of, got mentioned as a sort of at the bottom of the Fitz files, and one or two other little mentions. But, Gideon Haigh in the Australian wrote a lovely obituary. Robert Craddock in the News Limited Press wrote a lovely obituary. I'm very disappointed at the Sydney Morning Herald. And one other thing I'd just say about Brian Booth, that there's also the tweet that Nigel Farage has just put out about criticising the Aussies for not celebrating with champagne, which they didn't spray champagne all over themselves, which they did just to be nice to Usman Khawaja. I'm sure Khawaja didn't ask for it. They just thought, it's a nice thing to do. There's a bloke that doesn't want to drink alcohol. Let's not do that. And I want to make the point that if Farage is thinking, oh, you can't do anything these days. Well, way back in the day, Brian Booth, who didn't gamble, was new to the team, and the players were about to have a bit of a cards game with all gambling and stuff, hard drinking, hard gambling era. Keith Miller, the most kind of swashbuckling of all, recognized this could put him in an awkward situation. So proactively said, hey, Brian, why don't you just, you can be the banker, you can keep all the money. And that way, so, you don't have to play, but it allowed him to be included. And Brian Booth said how thankful he was at that nice little gesture of welcome. And I think that's all that the gesture of with Khawaja is as well. So Brian Booth, a real champion of Australian cricket and really regarded as a lovely man. Rest in peace.
Lovely way to finish the show, Paul. Well, thanks everybody for listening to Cricket Unfiltered.
And we don't endorse Nigel.
No, definitely not. And I think it's this whole debate about champagne is so stupid. Like, what is it? Like, alcohol does not define whether you're Australian or not. Like, it's such a stupid Neanderthal.
I loved all the people being
symmetry.
like, "Who's Nigel?" I was like, "Brilliant."
Yeah. If it wasn't clear, I also don't endorse Nigel Farage's comments. And also separately, I'd like to say Nigel Farage is an idiot.
Anyone who's listened to this podcast, I think, would have guessed where you sat on that. Jelisa, thanks so much for coming into the studio. What's the plan for you over the next few weeks?
Oh, I've just got a lot of work and anxiety to get through before I take off. I wish I had a few more weeks to do everything, but it's fun.
Fantastic. And Paul, we'll be catching up a lot. Well, you're welcome on the match reviews, but we've decided what we're going to record a full daily wrap when we can, basically, whether that's 3 a.m. or when we get up. And we're going to sometimes go live at lunch, like when Australia bowled at England for 60 again before lunch, we'll go live and dance on their grave, that kind of thing. When Australia lifts the Ashes midway through the third day of the third test, we'll do it then as well. But we'll do full wraps on the podcast feed definitely every day.
Can't wait.
Well, thanks everybody for listening to our preview, and we'll be back soon.